Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Marketing Masters. Really excited to have on two guests today, which is not quite the norm, but not against the norm per se. And I've been joking around with the guys in the background saying, "You're only allowed to talk when I point at you, and then you're only allowed to talk." No, so I'll be as nice as possible. I'm only kidding. But yeah, so I have Brett Townsend and Tim Hoskins on today, guys. Really happy to have you on. But Brett and Tim both work at Quester. And I'll start with Tim as a bit of a background. Tim is the president of Quester and oversees client services, strategic consulting, and also spearheads the innovation pipeline. Tim, I was interested in seeing your profile that you're a big fan of the aha moment when it comes to research. So I'm interested in digging in a bit more around that. I personally love those aha moments when I'm looking at things in data as well. But sometimes for me, those aha moments might turn into, oh no, I've actually got it wrong moments. Which I'd like to dig into in a bit as well. But Tim has been with Quester now for over 10 years, or was a client to Quester for over 10 years before joining the team. So I'm also interested in learning a little bit more actually from both of you guys, because you've gone from like the client side onto the, let's say, agency side. Maybe you might not describe yourselves as agency, but like moving over to the other side of the coin, let's say. So I'm interested in exploring that a little bit. And then as well as that, I have Brett here. And Brett has been the SVP of strategy at Quester now for the past almost 2 years. And before that, as I mentioned, Brett was working for companies such as Lowe's, Electrolux, and PepsiCo. So large multinational there experience. And again, Brett, like super interesting to understand from your side, like why the change over to the dark side. No, I'm kidding, but but yeah, we'll dig into that in a couple of minutes. But before we really start to dig, Tim, do you want to give us a quick overview about what Quester does?
Yeah, absolutely. And Andy, thank you so much for having us today. Quester is a brand and innovation strategy and insights consultancy. We focus on understanding consumer narratives because we believe that narratives are what drive human behavior. The key thing to know, though, to your point earlier, when you're looking at narratives, they can be fact or fiction, true, false, but it's the rationalization of why it's true for someone that drives their behavior or their belief in the narrative itself. So we take advantage of understanding those narratives and help organizations build their 3 to 5 year innovation pipelines, their brand positioning and strategy. How do they need to communicate, connect, inspire, motivate consumers to buy their products, buy their services?
Thanks for that overview. Quick question on that. So you guys work with large brands, right? So do those brands typically come to you already with something in mind when it comes to those narratives? Like, would they be coming with something that, like, they come, okay, Tim, Brett, like, this is what we think, and we
Yeah,
need you to prove it for us? Or is it like, hey, we're a little bit blind? Like, where do you start? Or is it a mix of all the above?
I think it's a mix of all the above. I think the really good organizations are ones that have their hypotheses, but they're humble enough to be um, open to surprises, right? Open to understanding the consumer at almost a visceral level, and really try to help them make progress in their lives. So, there are organizations who come to us and they say, "Hey, this is what we want to do." It's always fun when you get to the final and it's like, "Yes, you're exactly right," or maybe not. It's maybe a variation of what you thought before. But some of the best organizations are ones that are humble enough to be open to those surprises.
And what
Got
I would add on that, Andy, is that in addition to that, we do have clients who come to us who understand their consumers' beliefs and they understand their behavior, but they don't understand the narrative that's driving it. And that's typically been the shortcoming of consumer insights or market research over the years, is that we don't understand what is driving behavior many times. And it's these narratives that we either tell ourselves or that other people are telling us or that we're telling other people that just ingrain themselves in us that affect what we end up measuring. And so it goes kind of beyond the typical market research measurement and really gives us what are the true drivers of those beliefs and behaviors.
So you're digging one step deeper, basically, or 1 foot deeper than what would be the tip, or the traditional way of doing research, right? You would be going in terms of another layer below that to understand what is the driver towards that specific behavior, correct?
Correct. And it's
Okay.
not just through qualitative. I mean, there are other
Mm.
techniques that we use that really dig deeper, because a lot of times just when you're talking to someone, you don't get the narrative from that. It's really digging and being a little more source agnostic on how we go about getting those.
Do you guys have, like, you've mentioned the word narrative a good few times here. Do you guys have like a definition for narrative? Like when you say narrative, what is exactly that you mean?
A narrative is an overarching theme that you believe in, but a narrative is comprised of many, many different stories. So if we just look at something that, and not to get too controversial, but let's take the political spectrum.
Let's get controversial. Let's
Yeah.
do it. Come on.
If you look at the political spectrum, right, it's the left as the media describes it, and the right as the media describes it. But those narratives that exist on the right or the left are formed by what Brett said. It's the stories that we tell ourselves. It's the stories that we allow ourselves to listen to. And then it's the stories that we repeat and tell others. Those form the narratives. And whether those narratives are true or false doesn't matter to a person. Right? It's ingrained in their belief system. And that narrative, if they believe it to be true, shapes all of the decisions that they make. If we even look back to the pandemic, right? We had those who believed in the pandemic and the restrictions and all of the things that were being, I use the word mandated. And then you have those who did not. Depending upon what camp you were in, think back of people in your life that actually believed one or the other, and think about their behaviors and decisions that they made that were solely rooted in that narrative.
No, that makes
And
good
what
sense.
happens a lot of times is in consumer insights, we're so busy trying to prove something right or wrong or true or false that we don't listen. And the key to narratives is listening, because Tim mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter if the narrative from the consumer is right or wrong factually. It's what's driving their behavior. And if we're really going to have consumer empathy and develop solutions that solve these problems that the consumers have, we have to listen to those narratives and not be so quick to judge or to criticize what the narratives are, because then we're missing the point altogether. A more lighthearted example is sports. You have Manchester United in England and you have the Dallas Cowboys in the US, two of the most successful and most valuable franchises in the world. And their fan bases have this narrative where they tell themselves, we are the best. We should be competing for championships every year. Nobody's better than us. And so it leads to these, arrogant fan bases and false hope and, all these other things, and then major disappointment when the teams don't do well. And, and so, narratives are every aspect of our lives, and it drives everything that we do.
I really like the concept. And how dare you for mention Manchester United on this podcast? But no. So just to go back on the narrative thing. So Brett, you had mentioned like a couple of minutes ago as well. Like it's not just qualitative research that you're able to measure that in, but there's also other methods. Like how are you capturing that, especially at scale, right? Because we're talking about consumers. We're not talking about small numbers here. We're talking about big data, and also being able to get those narratives from big data and seeing within that like some let's say like parallels across the data and being able to make decisions based on the data. Like how are you guys gathering it and crunching it basically?
So what we do is we tap into what I call the world's biggest unmoderated focus group, which is cyberspace. And we have AI scraping tools that allow us to go in and go back 1 year, 2 years, however long we want, and see what people are talking about in long form discussions. So we're not talking about X or Instagram or things, but where people are actually getting on and having unfiltered, unmoderated conversations about brands, topics, items, products. You name it, people are out there talking about it. and we're not asking the questions. They're just talking. And so we're able to go in there and not just scrape the conversations, but then linguistically analyze them to come up with the narratives, and that's the difference between social analytics, social listening, and social narratives, is that analytics just give you stats about what's being talked about. Listening tells you the topics people are talking about. Narratives tells you the story that people are forming and what is, again, forming those beliefs and behaviors. And we not only have the AI capability to scrape and to analyze, but the real magic is with our people, our linguistic specialists that can go in and really understand language and what people are saying. And so then we can go to a client and say, look, we've uncovered hundreds of thousands. I mean, imagine that, hundreds of thousands or even sometimes millions of conversations about your brand or about this category or about this product or about this general topic. And here is the narrative. Here are the stories. Here is what is driving people's beliefs about these things. And it is immensely powerful. And it kind of cuts through this arrogance of our industry that it can't be good data unless we're asking the questions. I mean, no, it is, like I said, it's so free talking, free thinking. People are just expressing opinions in a way that they never do in the type of questioning we do in typical market research.
Unbiased data, basically, is what
very
you're saying.
Much so. Yeah. Very much.
But then there are times where biased data makes sense. And we have proprietary methodologies to collect and ask questions at scale. We built an AI-driven moderator over 10 years ago before artificial intelligence was cool and everyone was doing it. But that allows us to interview hundreds, if not thousands, of consumers at scale, where we're asking them direct questions because we want to understand their narrative around a central core topic, their beliefs, their emotions, etc.
Got it. Okay, so I want to change lanes a little bit here, guys, because you guys, we're going to do like the very necessary plug here. So plug. No, but with you guys I've just launched a book, right? Or recently have launched a book. Let's dig into that. Let's first of all, what was the thought process around starting this? Like, why did you push forward with such an idea? Where did you start with it, and how was that process of actually putting that down in writing and pushing it forward, etc. And then also let's dig into some of the topics that you'd explore in there as well. It'd be interesting hearing about that.
Well, Andy, I'll start and tell you the very beginning of it, and then I'll let Brett take over and tell you kind of the rest of the story. But years ago, Brett and I had worked together. He was my client for several years, and always thought differently about the challenges that he was trying to solve for the industry as a whole, consumers and how they think. And I co-chaired a conference called the Corporate Researchers Conference as part of the Insights Association. And I called Brett one day and I said, hey, why don't you do a keynote? Right? Take all of these things that you've been talking to me about over the years, put it into a 30-minute presentation and get up on stage in front of hundreds of people and just go at it. Have fun. Put some of those controversial topics out there, drop them in there, see where they go, and have fun with it. So we did that. Brett agreed, and it was in San Francisco, delivered a keynote address that to this day still has people talking about it on some of the things that he said. And that really became the foundation of the book.
Yeah. And then we'll fast forward to then I joined, I was never able to, I had a lot of great feedback, as Tim said, and as a couple of people, specifically friends of mine, said, you need to blow this out and write a book about this. Never really had time given the corporate jobs. And so then when I decided to come over to Quester, started writing, pitched the idea to Tim, he was like, yes, definitely keep going. And then a few months later, I went to Tim and I said, hey, I'd love for you to co-author this with me because, again, Tim and we're different, but we think a lot alike. And I really wanted his perspective and depth on it. So then we started writing and editing and brainstorming and cutting and, changing things and the whole bit. And what you see is the end product. And and I think it just really reflects kind of a starting point of conversation that we would like to have in this industry about how we need to evolve, how we need to get better, because this industry was born it was started by clinicians and academics whose threshold and whose what they were trying to measure at the time in the 1930s and 40s and stuff was very different than the climate we're in today. And yet we're still holding on to a lot of methodologies and a lot of dogma in our thinking. And we need to evolve. Everybody wants to talk about the future of consumer insights. It's going to look very much the same as it does now, unless we kind of resolve some of these things from the past and evolve.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because you even mentioned about the stuff from the past. Like I studied marketing, right? So that's my craft. I'm a CMO, and I also studied marketing. But even when I studied it back in the day, I finished studying 20 years ago almost. The research piece, I remember going back on the research. Like if I go back and think about the research piece, it was like from the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Like the methodology, like etc. When I wrote my thesis, it was based off a methodology from something that was created, I think, in the 60s even. And like we were following guidelines that had been somewhat updated, but it was way out of date. Like just crazy, like 50 years old type of thing. I mean, you've mentioned 20s and 30s, of course. Like go back to measuring consumer behavior, etc. Like it goes back to those times. But is there there's probably a lot of hesitation towards it would there be amongst peers perhaps that are used to being traditional?
I think that with any change in any industry, I honestly, I look across the different departments and functions and roles within any corporation. Who isn't undergoing massive amounts of change right now?
Yeah.
I think the difference is, are you going to look at this moment in time and get defensive and revert back to what's you're comfortable with and what works? Or are you going to push through and chart out a new future? And that's really what we're trying to do in the book, is to talk about there are many things that built this industry that work, that we should safeguard, that we should protect, right? And to hold true. Even some of those methodologies that were from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they still work today and are valuable. But the really question is that how can we evolve and push forward and not close ourselves off to opportunity? And I think every single department, whether it's marketing, finance, you name it, they're all going through this right now. There's a level of risk taking that's involved that certain industries are adverse to. We are a lower risk tolerance industry, and we have to overcome that now. Start taking the risks that the executives within the organizations are wanting to help push the businesses forward, to help push consumer understanding forward. It doesn't have to be 100% correct. 70 to 80% has to be good enough to be able to make informed and strategic decisions.
And what we hear a lot from executives is that I have enough data, I have enough information. What I don't have is direction. What I don't have are, what do I need to go do? And that's, I think, the emphasis. Like Tim said, we're not saying trash all these methodologies and that they don't work. I mean, in the right context, still, a lot of them are effective. It's just, what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on the methodology, or are we focusing on the story? Are we focusing on the outcomes? And we even see CEOs that are outsourcing insights away from their own insights departments to consulting companies who may not do the best job doing insights, but they're outcome driven. And that's what CEOs are. How do we sell more stuff? Period. And that's where we've fallen short, is that we want to share data and numbers and charts that don't always lead to sales. They don't tell great stories, and they're not actionable. And I think that's one of the main calls to action of the book, is like, let's stop focusing on the methodologies and focus on what really needs to get done in the type of business climate we live in with all the disruption.
I really like that. I did something's just really resonated with me there when you're just mentioning. I'm sitting on a mountain of data, but what the hell can I do? Like, what are the
Mm.
decisions I can make? You know, and I've seen that in so many organizations that I've worked in, regardless of the amount of data, if it's a huge amount of data. So I work in SaaS, right?
Oh gosh,
And
yeah,
I
you've
work,
got a
yeah,
lot.
yeah, exactly. I've worked in high ticket SaaS, which is what Marmine does, which is high value, low volume, and I've also worked in high volume SaaS, which is, you know, you can have millions of customers all paying you a small amount, right? And especially in that high volume SaaS piece, like you can find yourself going down a rabbit hole when it comes to like decision making when it comes to data. And I've heard so many times that, oh, we just need to be more data driven. You know, data driven is here all the time, which I think is missing out on that outcome piece that you've like mentioned there, Brett. I think people have lost sight of what the outcome is, like what are we trying to achieve here, and just got really, really lost in mountains of data and fell down a rabbit hole with it, right? And I've also been victim to it, right? And then I'm sitting there like after a couple of months of a data project, and I'm like, what the hell am I even looking at here?
Yeah.
Like, what can I
Well,
do with this?
but we look at the data analytics industry, and corporations over the last decade have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into their IT infrastructure just to get the data organized. And so there's an immense amount of pressure to get some ROI on, okay, we did this. Now, how is it going to inform decisions? And truthfully, Andy, some of the best companies in the world that we have the opportunity to work with, they've figured it out. Data can get you a portion of the way there, in a very good portion of the way there, where you're not asking as many questions of consumers. The data will point you into the right directions. But these companies also see the value in understanding the narrative that's driving that behavior. It's the power and the combination of the two, and it's not one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's the combination of the two where it's the 1 + 1 = 3, and you get the outcomes that you desire as an organization, top line and bottom line.
Yeah, when companies say they want to be more data driven, what they're saying is we want less opinions and we want more fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what drives those decisions initially. But even the greatest data only tells you the what. It does not tell you the why.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't innovate with just data. You can't do great branding with just data. And as Tim said, we advocate for both. The best organizations, PepsiCo, where I was, we had the great data analytics and we had the great consumer empathy and understanding, and they must go together. And the problem with our industry and with companies over the years is that pendulum just swings so much in the different directions. It's like, oh, we're going to be totally research driven. No, we're going to be totally data driven. And no, we're going to tell stories. And no, we're going to use numbers. And, it's fun. And the great companies are the ones that find the sweet spot right there in the middle and say, no, we need both. And we need to understand the consumer while us also historically understanding data, what's going on, and even have the data be predictive and tell us kind of what's going on and what may happen. Still won't tell us the why. And that's where we kind of have that marriage of great consumer insight with great data.
Got it. And to focus back on the book then as well, if I'm C-level, let's say I'm a CEO of a PepsiCo, what's the book teaching me? Like what's the value in it for me?
Yeah, I think number one, there'll probably be a lot of CEOs that will say amen and nod their heads to a lot of the issues, because most of the book really is about the consumer insights industry as a whole and where our shortcomings have been and how we need to evolve. But there's also some things that we talk about directly. The very last chapter is mostly directed to senior level executives about the partnership, because it will always be a partnership and we always have to work together. And so a few things that we talk about in there is that, a lot of senior level executives, because of just the extremely pressurized and busy nature of their jobs, they're very removed from the consumer. And so really tapping into your consumer insights group, setting the standard and setting the example about we are going to be consumer centric and we are going to do everything with the consumer, but then just kind of understanding a little bit about what is the consumer conflict that your consumer faces? What are the consumer beliefs about your brand? And what are those consumer needs that are met by your brand? And if you as a senior level executive understand those three things, then it makes things a whole lot easier for your entire company to be consumer centric. It's also putting the responsibility of consumer centricity, not just in the hands of your consumer insights team, but in the hands of the entire company. Because when the entire company is consumer centric, then that's when solutions really start to come together. And the best relationships that I had and the best success that I had on the corporate side was when my marketing coworkers we were as invested together in the consumer as anyone else in the company, and that was our goal. And so I think that's just kind of a highlight of what that chapter is, but there's a lot more in there, but that's really what it comes down to for senior level executives.
We'll make sure to put a link in the description as well so that people can go and check out that book. So congratulations on the book as well, guys. That's really, really great. And I'm sure it was a lot of work, right? And I'm sure it's paying its dividends now, right? But before we finish up, I said at the start of this, I wanted to ask you something. Why did you go over to the dark side? Come on, tell me. You've gone over from client, you've gone to client to the other side. So Brett, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, Tim's always been on the client side. So I actually started my career on the agency side. That's where I really kind of learned a lot and got to the point where I felt very comfortable with understanding, the consulting and innovation, all those different things. And then purposely moved over to corporate. And I think for me, it was, after 15 years on the corporate side, for me, it was just kind of a mental thing that I wanted my life back. It's like the higher up I went in the company, the less control over my life that I had. And I think at this point in my career, I wanted to create more and have that freedom. And, Tim and I had become friends over the years because I was a client of Questor's for 10 to 12 years, going back to when I was my early days at PepsiCo. And we had often talked about working together. And so when I told Tim a couple of years ago that I was thinking about now's the time, I'm ready to make the move. And he was like, okay, let's do this and let's create something together. And so that's really where we have we've pivoted what Questor does. And we're really leaning into what Tim said at the very beginning, the brand and innovation strategy, consulting. We're really developing these types of things together that really fit the need of the corporate executive and the corporate marketer, corporate researcher, because I've been there. I've been in those roles. I've been in marketing roles. I've been in insights roles. Tim has worked with the CEOs of major companies and knows what they're asking and what they're thinking. And so combined with the whole great team at Questor, it's really been an amazing journey that we're on. And it's one of those things where I wanted to go somewhere where we walk the walk of the book, like all of the principles in the book, like we live those every day. And that's what we offer to consumers. It's not philosophical. It's very practical and things that people can implement immediately. And so that was my draw to come over to the dark side, as you say, because I feel like, teaming with Questor was a perfect marriage of what we feel are the best solutions for companies.
Sounds like the brighter side, actually. Now that you described it in that way.
It's been great. Yeah, it's been great. So I love it.
Good. No, I'm glad. Hey guys, we've just come up on our time here. So a big thank you to you both for spending the time and speaking with me today. Where's the best place for people to find you?
LinkedIn.
Excellent.
Yep. I mean, obviously Questor.com. You can go there, but you can find us both on LinkedIn, and you can just look up Insights on the Brink on Amazon and you can find it there. So any number of places. We'll
make sure that we get all those links shared in the description here of the episode. And guys, thank you so much again. It's been great speaking to you both. And don't be shy to come back on again.
Thanks,
awesome. Thanks, Andy.
Guys, it's been another episode of Masters Marketing. Tune in again next week for more great content. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.